It is time.
It's time for a good old-fashioned Q&A,
yes.
MMA fans.
Are you nervous, Frank? What are you feeling here?
Weirdly, yes. Like totally fine while doing it, and now I'm like, dude, you built this up to a...
This is big. I mean, there's only been one other moderator in the history of the program. Big
Just remember, it can only get better from here.
And now,
you've been underselling it. By the way, guys, he even sent me a PDF. Now, just for the record, moderator did the same. Lewis did the same. But, you know, I thought maybe he would just copy-paste it into a text. I wasn't sure.
He puts his pants on just like all of us, one leg at a time.
Now, unlike him, I'm seeing here right off the bat, and I'm not trying to compare. You know, I love all my kids just the same, but you're adding multiple questions per page here, so it's not just one per page. You're looking to
You gotta save the paper. Save some paper.
Okay. All right. Well, here we go. I cannot wait to get this rolling. Without further ado, of course, these came via my Substack. Appreciate everyone who chimed in. Hut is number one. Ariel, is Sean Strickland MMA's Stone Cold Steve Austin? He says he wants to. He says what he wants to. He does what he wants to. Dana has said he won't tell any fighter what to say. This guy is wild and seems to live by his own set of rules, and thus far is backing it up. Are we in the Sean 316 era? Also, should Izzy turn heel? Love the show. Thanks to GC, the mysterious one, and Mike Heck for the watch party. Love it. Thanks again. So first question, solid. Serious Frank reference in the question. Not sure if that was on purpose or not. But
you'll see a pattern.
It's a great point. Look, as I said on Monday, he resonates with this audience. He resonates with the MMA fan. Is he Stone Cold? Well, Stone Cold was very anti-establishment. And the establishment was Vince McMahon and the Stooges and the Goons and all that stuff. Sean is not anti-Dana White. He is not anti-UFC. He is anti perhaps a different establishment. He is anti a certain type of person living in the world or this country. But when I think of him, I don't think of him necessarily as Stone Cold, because what pops, in my mind, first and foremost about Stone Cold was his feud with Vince McMahon. And he was like, the disgruntled worker who gave his boss the FU. Sean isn't that guy. Who is Sean Strickland? Is he Remy from Higher Learning? I don't know. You tell me. That's the one I always go to. But no, he has turned the corner. He is much more babyface than heel at this point. And what's so amazing about his superstardom at this point, and I don't feel like that's an unfair thing to say. Like, I feel, correct me if I'm wrong, GC, were people somewhat indifferent to Sean? Like, they felt a certain way about him, but not strongly enough to hate or love him. They were just sort of like, oh, Sean Strickland's on the guard. And a year ago, July of last year, he was sort of the butt of the joke in the MMA community for the way in which he fought against Alex Pereira. And, even when he came back and lost to Jared and then came back, 2-3 weeks later and fought Imavov, it wasn't like the MMA community was like, holy shit, Sean Strickland, he's a fighter's fighter. It was like, all right, they can't find anyone else and Sean Strickland's on the card. Like, this feeling towards him, for whatever reason, like this has expedited, I think, in the last month or so. Honestly, it may have even expedited Sean Strickland when there was that weird period where the UFC was unwilling to book him in this fight and they were searching for someone else. When they went with DDP over Izzy, there was no one really banging the drum that Sean Strickland has to have this fight. Now, as I've said, when the fight was announced, I didn't see anyone say this fight sucks. It was like almost when the fight got announced and Izzy said, okay, I'll go in that direction because DDP isn't available, everyone was like, you know what? I'd like to live in a world where this guy is champion. But I don't recall people in May, June, July banging the drum for this guy to be the next guy, and that we all, they weren't willing him to the top like they were other superstars who were climbing the ladder. Am I off when I say this, GC?
No, I would actually say when the Imavov fight was booked, people were like, oh, great, another Sean Strickland main event. People used to always just reference that it's just like a kind of like a boring sparring session.
Yeah.
He goes in these 25-minute fights.
It's really interesting. And so what do you think it is? To me, it really just started in the last month. And I think like I said, he handled last week so perfectly from beginning to end. Everything about him. And, I'm hearing some things about stuff that happened throughout the week that we don't know about, and I can't wait to talk to Eric Nicksick about. But ultimately, he didn't cross the line to the point where, the thing with the fan could have gone horribly wrong. It didn't. And he benefited from that because it's like, look at this guy. What won't he do? He's a loose cannon. He's crazy. He marches to the beat of his own drum. But who is he? What's the analogy? Maybe New York Rick has a good analogy.
I do not.
No, okay. But he's not Stone Cold. Hey, Rick, nice haircut.
You saw me Monday.
No, this is a different haircut. Something's changed here.
It's wet.
All right. You should go for a quick swim.
I did get out of the shower.
Quick dip in the pool. All right. He's not Stone Cold. Do you agree with that? I
agree with. He's very much a partner with the UFC, right? Like he's very much of they tell me what to do. They offer me fights. I come in and show up. That's not Stone Cold. Stone Cold is rallying against that, right? But there is a rebel nature to it. I think he's rebelling against kind of like what the conventional expectations of a fighter are, but it is not against the man, right? It is not against the corporation. He's happy when he gets the paychecks. He wants to be there and wants to be active and wants to collect those checks. So you're right that that's not the guy, but I don't know who the guy is. Maybe there is no guy. Maybe Sean Strickland is his own archetype and he is now establishing that.
I will say this though. If you think this is all a thing and he's living his life, like everything he does is very calculated. Now, I just want to say it's unlike, say, Colby Covington, because I believe that the Sean Strickland that we get is truly him. Like Colby Covington was just a certain type of guy, and then there was a point in time in our country's history where he found an opening and then he dialed it up. Who knows if he even felt the way in which he purports to feel now back then when he was, struggling for a spot on the roster and was, as he has said and as the UFC has said, close to getting cut. Strickland was, for the most part, kind of always this guy, but it just seemed like over time, he got a lot more comfortable with telling us who he is. The guy who showed up with the long hair looked completely different, probably wasn't as comfortable talking like this. But I believe he is the genuine article in that, like, he's not playing a character. That said, I do feel like everything that he does is calculated in this regard. I talked about the post-fight press conference on Saturday. When he's talking about Izzy should have done this and that to endear himself to the Australian people, that's a guy who gets marketing, who gets fight promotion. When he does that video on Monday night about the belt being broken, he's doing it, to say like, look, guys, this thing doesn't mean much to me. I'm the everyman. Let me tape it up. He's very much playing the Mick Foley character in that video. I'm the everyman. I'll show up. This belt is just a thing. It doesn't matter if there's duct tape on it or not. Whatever. But he's shooting that video in his gun room or whatever it is. He could have shot that on his porch. He could have shot that anywhere. But that shot is not a coincidence. So there's a lot. He's just very smart. And that appeals to a lot of people. And so he is doing a great job of marketing himself and putting himself out there. And we'll see, like, if he can continue on that path and not cross the line, because now there's going to be a greater spotlight on him. He stands to be very popular and make a lot of money. And so we'll see just how smart he is in terms of not being able to cross the line, because sometimes I think he is very, like, when he's talking about shooting the dog, there are some people who would, push back on that. Honestly, who knows if that even happened. But it's all very fascinating to watch. He couldn't be more different than Izzy. And I think ultimately that's what this comes down to. He couldn't be more different than Izzy. Izzy was polarizing. People love to feel a certain way about Izzy, good and bad. And he certainly had a lot of haters, and he certainly fed into that, played into that. And now you get this completely different personality, and a lot of people find that to be very refreshing. Aim on. Hey, Ariel, you mentioned that Eric Nicksick's coaching performance at 293 ranks as one of the best you've seen. What are some of the other great coaching performances you have witnessed in MMA? I mean, there's a million. I just mean getting to see those snippets in between the rounds is, to me, sometimes people ask me, like, do you miss going to events? How come you don't go to events? This, that, and the other. And the truth is, I feel like I could actually do my job better. Now, of course, you could watch it after the fact, but like in the moment, and because I have to do the post-show seconds later, I love being able to see those moments and understand what is going on in between rounds, which is something you can't necessarily do if you're sitting cage side. You could do it if you're sitting in the back, but you get the point. That access is tremendous. And that's, by the way, why I don't like when I hear people, like I saw some people getting mad over some of the language that he used. That, to me, is our privilege. We are intruding on their time. Of course, like, you don't want to hear someone say like totally outlandish, crazy, offensive, racist, whatever stuff. But if he's swearing, if he's dropping, some cuss words, this or that. In that moment, he's doing what he has to do to rile his fighter up in a championship fight. We don't get to reprimand or have the same type of take that we have on, say, a Radke or Manel Cape, who's doing it on the microphone in front of everyone, and it's very clear that he is on television right now. Nicksick probably doesn't even realize he's on TV. They're not tapping him on the shoulder and saying, hey, the red light is on. He's doing his thing as a coach, and that is our privilege. We are intruding. We're eavesdropping. You can't hold him to the same standard. And I love that stuff. I love seeing the fire. I love seeing the way in which he gets his soldiers fired up. So, I mean, you think of Dave Lavelle last year with Leon. I mean, that's just legendary stuff. You think of moments like Ray Longo with Chris Weidman, punch him in the chest. What was that? What were we looking at? Was that a plane or something?
No.
Okay. I always feel like there's a moment where, like, when I break the fourth wall, everyone's like, "Who's gonna answer?" Appreciate you, Frank.
Yeah,
you're owning the segment here. I appreciate it. Dave Lavelle, Ray Longo, those are up there. Bang Ludwig with TJ, the first Hannah Barral fight. I mean, just a million. We haven't always been privy to those corner talks, but when you are, it's brilliant stuff. It's absolutely brilliant stuff. His second question is, have you any insight into what will happen with CM Punk? Do you think he will re-sign with WWE, or has he proved to be too troublesome to risk upsetting the locker like he has in AEW? I'd be very surprised if he signs with WWE. I just think honestly, I don't know if he would want to go back, and I feel like they wouldn't want to have him back. He's up there in age, and I don't know how like close or how much he truly wanted to go back to wrestling, when he ultimately made the decision. I think he kind of just looked around and said, like, this is the best spot, and maybe a change of scenery would regain his love. But I really think the end of his time at WWE changed the way in which he feels about pro wrestling. And I wonder, I haven't talked to him, I wonder if the way this ended was kind of like the final straw for him. So I know there are people clamoring to have him back. I saw Nick Khan's comments to Mark Ramundi yesterday where he didn't say yes or no, but it sounded a lot more like a no than a yes. I'd be very surprised. The world of pro wrestling has taught me one thing, and that is, I mean, never say never. Everyone comes back, it seems like. When Bret Hart came back, that pretty much told me everyone is able to come back. And who knows? Like, who knows where Vince is in 2 years? Who knows who's around? Who knows who's running the show? But right now, WrestleMania 40, Philadelphia, I personally would be shocked. But again, if there's one sport that has proven to us that you should never say never, it's this one, or one form of entertainment. But if I had to, make a prediction, I would say I'd be very surprised if it happened, and I wouldn't be surprised if he never wrestles again at this point. Andrew. Hi, Ariel. How much does Israel not having a belt hurt the possibility of an Africa event? I would argue having a numbered event in Africa when Israel or Usman don't have belts is near impossible. However, it does open the possibility for a fight night between Israel and DDP, where in Africa this event would be a large debate if it was headlined by Israel versus DDP. Thanks for all you do. I don't know how close they were, to be honest. Maybe this makes it less probable. I do think you could do a pay-per-view with Israel and DDP in Africa, and it would be very well received. But I don't think that they were like, the UFC has also proven that, like, they put their dates in, and, like, you're either in or you're out. Like, just witness the fact JDM isn't on this card, Dan Hooker isn't on this card, Alex Volkanovski isn't on this card. Izzy isn't Australian, and he ended up headlining. He was the most obvious choice, but, like, you would, if they are booking their events based on, region all the time, then all those guys would have been on this card. Volk wouldn't have fought in July. He would have fought in Sydney in September. The UFC is so big, so popular, so powerful now that they can go to these markets and not necessarily have anyone from the market on the card. They sold this thing out with, very few fights announced and certainly not a main event announced. And if they went, to most markets, I would say there are some, like, there's some places where maybe you need, but like if they go to London or they go to somewhere in the UK or they go to Ireland or they go to Toronto, you don't need a bunch of Canadians on that card. Does it help? Maybe to a degree, but the sport is so popular and so hot right now that you don't necessarily need that. So could they go to Africa and have a bunch of guys on there and the top fights don't feature any African fighters? Absolutely. Would it be weird after having 3 champions from Africa and not have a single one on the card? Sure, but they were dealing with a whole bunch of different circumstances, and it's hard to just show up and put on an event in a country, especially when you have all these other, jurisdictions, governments, countries paying to have the UFC come. They get a site fee, so they're getting top dog. That's why when you watch 293, there's all these commercials about Sydney. They're saying like, come back to Australia, come sit. Like this is paid by the tourism board. You'll see the same with Abu Dhabi next month. When they go to a lot of these places, you see these commercials for the markets. You didn't see that back in the day. It's because they're paying for that. This is a commercial for them ultimately. Oh yeah,
Oh wow!
Oh,
Let it all out.
Yeah. In an ESPN article this week, Tim Bradley called out changes he wants to see in. By the way, Frank, you're doing great so far. I just want to let you know. Tim Bradley called out changes he wants to see in boxing judging. The changes outlined: judge and ref accountability, transparency, open scoring. What? Has he been listening to this show? Good old Timothy? Are the same ones you and others have outlined for MMA as well? Do you ever see the potential for actors in boxing and MMA working on a joint regulatory changes across the two sports? I mean, wholesale changes like this, no. Incremental changes, perhaps. One of my great dreams is that there would be one national commission. There would be one combat sports commission, and it wouldn't be broken up by state, so that you wouldn't have these things where, like, in Colorado, we do this, and in Texas, we do that. I think that would be better for MMA and boxing. I don't think that will happen due to politics, but I think that would be tremendous. So, yeah, is there, judge and ref accountability? Does one commissioner say, hey, I think you guys should talk after controversial or questionable calls? Sure. Transparent, open scoring, a little too drastic for some of these older guards, but maybe the younger generation comes up and takes over and they're fans of this show and they say, you know what, Helwani's been talking about this for 10 years. Maybe we should try it. But is this happening anytime soon? No. Mark, hey, Ariel and team. I'm wondering when the UFC might return to the wider regions. It hasn't been since Dan Hooker and Paul Felder that we've had a global event here in New Zealand. And in my opinion, the Sydney card was full of fighters who should have been on a fight night card in Auckland, but instead a UFC fight night in Sydney. Makes me think we won't have anything anytime soon. This is sort of like what I was talking about earlier. And I've stopped watching Apex cards. Would you look at that? Just can't take them anymore. Don't blame you. Though I know my Fight Pass cost still hasn't been discounted despite the event cost savings. Any thoughts? That's a great point, by the way. Dana White said at the post-fight press conference on Saturday that they are going to start, traveling more. I could definitely see them like going less and less to the Apex. I don't think the Apex days are going to end anytime soon, but I do think that, they're going to be going to, you're starting to see it, Singapore, Paris. But again, it's these countries and governments that are paying for the events. That's where they're going to go first. And states too, by the way. So have I heard anything about New Zealand at the moment? No. The fact that they just went to that region last week would suggest that they're not going back anytime soon. They just did a deal with Sydney, so they're going to go there a couple times now in the coming years. And I haven't heard anything about New Zealand, but it would certainly make sense. Izzy had said that he is not going to fight on a New Zealand card. I don't know if he's changed his stance since, but during the pandemic, that's what he said. So that would certainly hurt the card too. Cool. Happy Wednesday to Ariel and the crew. Thank you for all you do. I just have a few softballs for you gents today. For Ariel, have you heard any recent rumblings concerning MVP signing with a promotion just yet? No, nothing just yet. In fact, it's his manager's birthday today. By the way, I
sending a birthday text.
I did the birthday text, and now I was like, hey, any news on MVP? Let's see if we get something here, guys.
Did he reply to the happy birthday?
He did. Yes, he did. He said, I appreciate you. Thank you. So I have not heard anything. Thought maybe the KSI Prime card on October 14th, but I have not heard anything just yet. I would like for him to sign with the UFC. I do think the new Bellator PFL conglomerate organization, whatever you want to call it, merger would be interesting. But there's so many fresh matchups for him in the UFC. That would be my vote. For Conor, what promotion would you like to see MVP compete in?
Yeah, I'm with you, the UFC as well.
For New York Rick, which option do you believe holds the most reward if you're MVP at this stage in his career?
UFC.
For Frank, will you be buying stocks in the UFC? I think he means the TKO group. And have you bought stock before? For some reason, I feel like you're very well educated on the stock market.
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. No, I won't be buying any stock on TKO, and I'm not one to play the stock market.
Thank you for your time, and as always, thank you for your great content. I was thinking about this. Yes.
Important to note that the TKO stock is the WWE stock, right? There was a merger. There wasn't an IPO on TKO, which represents the combination of UFC and WWE. The WWE stock became TKO stock. Mm-hmm. So that is what has happened yesterday. So that started at that price, and now it will continue at that price.
So you could have
until the market moves.
You could have back in the day, like if you wanted to support or say like you could have gotten you could have purchased Endeavor stock. But now if you want to
Endeavor
say
stock was an IPO.
Yeah. Now you go to the TKO. If you want to be like, oh, I own a piece of TKO, which is the house where WWE and UFC lives. My question is, I don't partake in this sort of thing, and I have no interest in doing so. Is it inappropriate for a media member to purchase TKO stock?
It's a question you would be, of anybody here, you would be the only one to know the answer to that, because I don't have a background in journalism, don't know.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking out loud.
What do you currently think?
I lean towards yes, but it's not like they're paying you. I don't know. It's like, I was thinking about it yesterday. I was like, is it inappropriate? We've never really been faced with this before in MMA.
And again, to lay out the term simply, you would be saying, right, now you're intrinsically tied to TKO, which operates both WWE and UFC, and their benefit would then be your financial benefit by owning that stock.
Yeah. And
you'd be incentivized to then make sure that they are successful or contribute in certain ways to make sure they are successful, and therefore your financial portfolio would be successful. Yeah, I suppose
you're also
there's definitely
rooting for them, right? Like you don't want them to fail. Hello.
There's definitely a clear vision there for how that could be a conflict. I could see that.
I wonder. I'd love to talk to a because you learn about, like in journalism ethics, which is the first course I took at Syracuse, you learn about things that you shouldn't take and things that you shouldn't do. But I don't remember us I don't even know if this was a thing back then. I mean, maybe it was. Like, how many sports entities are even public? Are the Packers public? Am I wrong about that? I know you could get shares in the Packers. But like if you're covering the Packers, would you do that? I don't know. It's a weird thing. The whole thing is weird. One other thing that I think is very fascinating, like there's a lot of personalities involved. Like you look at that picture, Vince and these are like behemoths, right? In their respective fields. Ari Emanuel, Mark Shapiro, Patrick Whitesell wasn't there, but he's obviously a big deal. Vince McMahon, Nick Khan, Dana White, of course. And I'm just curious how it's all gonna play out. Are they really gonna, like I think Dana, if you watch the presser yesterday, he makes it seem like, we're doing our thing, they're doing their thing. And then you listen to some of the WWE guys and it's like, no, we're going to like work in concert and we're going to, do this and that. And I saw an interview with Mark Shapiro yesterday on The Ringer, and he was talking about, like the things that they'll do. And like, I just find this, like, it's never seamless. And we saw this when Endeavor bought UFC in 2016, a few months later, unfortunately, there was, there was some, what's the term that people use, like redundancy, and there were layoffs, right? And so I fear that this is going to happen as well, which is typically what happens in these massive mergers. I just wonder how it's all going to flow. Like you would think there's going to be a lot of benefits, especially from the production side. Like the biggest takeaway of it all to me, and the biggest story, like if you ask me like, what is next? What's the story to watch now? Okay, they're under the same umbrella. What's the story to watch now? The story to watch now are the media rights deal. WWE's is up in October of 2024. UFC's is up at the end of 2025. And then WWE's Peacock network deal, PLE deal, is up in 2026. Are those all going to converge? Are they going to try to sell package deals because they're all kind of like 1 year, 1 year, 1 year? Will they try to then make the next deal, have them all aligned? Does this mean like WWE is going to Peacock and UFC is going to Peacock? Does this mean that WWE is now going to try to do, go back to pay-per-view because of the success of UFC on pay-per-view? Like that to me, the media rights component, because there's no such thing as appointment television anymore other than live sports. Combat sports is doing tremendous right now. Sports fees are going up. Like that is the biggest thing to watch. And then production, travel, and then, jobs, roles. Like anyone who's talking about, is Roman Reigns going to fight a UFC 300? Like this is a very sophomoric way of looking at this whole thing. There's not going to be an overlap there, but it's all that other fascinating stuff, if you care about this stuff, that is going to be really, really interesting to watch over the next couple of years. Tremendous job so far, Frank. Well
Thanks,
done.
Man. I'll take my flowers.
Connor from Canada. Hi, Ariel. I was wondering if there was a moment early in your life and career where you realized that this was what you wanted to do with your life. Thanks. Well, there's several moments. I've talked about one of them. I was in 9th grade. Mrs. Blitt Hanson's class, English class, may she rest in peace. We're supposed to be reading some English book, and I have Sports Illustrated. I have the book, I have Sports Illustrated tucked in, and I'm reading the Sports Illustrated Invictus. Thank you, Shaheen. There he is. I knew he was going to come through. Someone was going to come through. Thanks for having my back. It was Invictus. He did that one as well, and it was tremendous. So I'm reading Sports Illustrated, and they're breaking down the best schools in America for X, Y, and Z. And there's a little blurb which states Syracuse University is the best school for sports broadcasting. And these are the famous people who went there and all. And I'm like, wow. So that's a moment where I'm like, I want to do this for a living. Now, as far as MMA is concerned, when I got to school, when I got to Syracuse, and I realized that everyone wanted to be the next Bob Costas, Marv Albert, et cetera, I remember telling my parents, like, hey, everyone here wants to be the same person. I want to be something different. I want to go down a different path. I want to be the Howard Cosell of this sport and this organization called the UFC. MMA, it's 8 years old, not even 8 years. It was about to celebrate its 8th birthday. And, I want to be that guy. So I'm going to start focusing on this more. And I'm going to have a morning, quote unquote, radio show, which was streamed from the student station, the Shine Auditorium. It was online, werw.syr.edu is where you can stream it. This is in 2001. And no one was listening except for my mom and my sister and maybe sometimes my friends back home. But I would have people like Bruce Buffer and, I had Dan Severn on and I had Dave Meltzer on, and I would have some pro wrestlers on as well. And it was a great time. And, I did that for my 3 years there, and then I got into TV production, but I always kept an eye on MMA and the UFC, and I was ordering all the pay-per-views, and I kind of felt like as a fan, I wasn't being served, there wasn't the coverage that I wanted, that I was craving. And then the big turning point for me was 2006, November, Montreal, Champ Sports Bar, Saint Laurent Boulevard in Montreal, and, I'm watching George St. Pierre beat Matt Hughes, and the place erupts and the place goes crazy. Like he, was playing for the Canadians, and they had just won the Stanley Cup. And I was like, I want to be involved. I want to be in the mix. I want to talk about this. There are people who care about this sport as much as I do. There are people wrapped around the block waiting to watch this. And I don't feel like it's being covered. And this feels like it's only going to get bigger and explode. And so I felt like this is where I want to be. And then once I started to get in the mix, and like, you're there for Kimbo's fight against James Thompson. May he rest in peace, Kimbo Slice, at the Prudential Center in Newark in 2009. And you're there for Elite XC and Strikeforce. Because early on, UFC wouldn't credential me because I was with a small website called MMArated.com. But you're there and you're in the mix, and there's moments, and Kimbo's getting knocked out, and then you're finally in the UFC, and it's UFC 100, and you're interviewing Dana White, and then it's UFC 112 in Abu Dhabi, and then it's UFC 120 in London, and you're just like, holy shit, this is the life. And you're getting to travel to these cool places and these fights mean so much. And I was saying this to someone recently. It's like, I remember doing the show and we're coming back to the set, to the studio to talk about this happening and this big moment and that big moment. But I felt like it was all contained in this little bubble. And so to see now how popular the sport has become, where people are coming up to me and I'm on vacation and people are like, did you see Sean O'Malley? And I'm like, holy crap, this is crazy that people care about this. And Sean Strickland is breaking through. And obviously Connor was a big part of that. And like to see just how far the sport has come and to see how young the audience is now, as opposed to back in the day. Back in the day was, I felt like 30 and up. Now I feel like it's like 12, 13 and up in terms of who is watching and supporting and following and living and dying with these fights. So it's just an amazing thing to be a part of. And yeah, those are some moments. Being Bobby. Ariel, in honor of Mysterious Frank's debut as moderator, I'd like to ask a more, quote, inside baseball question. How often does Mysterious Frank and or other production staff talk in your ear that the audience can hear throughout the show? In all your years,
like to know? Yeah,
and I don't see. I'm going to get to that in a moment. In all your years of broadcasting, how long did it take for you to get used to talking to an audience while you're being talked to in your ear? So I'll say two things. As far as someone talking in my ear and it not being on the air, that happens minimally. I would say it probably happens like 0.01% of the time. It's a unique dynamic for this particular show because if someone were to talk in my ear, it might be Frank. And Frank is also on the air, and it sounds the same when he's off air and when he's on air. And so I usually just react because I think it's always on air. Like that last thing you just said, was that on air or off air?
That was on air.
See, yeah. So,
but I was pretending like it wasn't.
Sure. But it sounds the same, which is tricky. Usually when you're doing a show and you're on the set and someone's in your ear telling you like 30 seconds or you're next or whatever, it's a producer and that person isn't on the air, so you just kind of ignore that person. But on this show, we don't really have that dynamic. We like for everything to essentially be on the air. There will be some times where I'm like doing an interview and I'm going like this, and Frank is like, stop rubbing your chin. It's also, just to be honest, rare that Frank takes on many roles. Moderator Frank. He's also, I would say, a producer as well, because like the audio guy isn't usually the relay, so to speak. But that says a lot about his, I would say, ambition and just the kind of leader that he is back there. So that is unique. But as far
Thanks,
as
man.
Yeah, no
just
problem.
don't cash that check until Friday.
What's happening on Friday? Oh, got it.
Yeah.
But when I do traditional TV, there is someone in my ear. I prefer less is more. I can't tell what I dislike more, when someone's in my ear when I'm talking, or when someone's in my ear when I'm the interviewer. I just asked a question and someone's answering the question, and now I can't hear the answer because when someone's in your ear speaking, that now gets blocked out. That is annoying, but there's no great way to do it, unfortunately. So I'm comfortable with it. I would say that I'm not your traditional broadcaster in the sense that I'm not great with a prompter. There is no prompter here. I've never really been good at reading. There's a skill involved when you read the prompter and you're like so smooth and your eyes aren't moving and your voice isn't changing and people at home don't even realize. Like that is a true skill. And the great broadcasters of all time, the great newsmen, all that stuff, like they read a prompter and they can do it 1,000 times better than me. I think my forte is off the cuff, going, 3+ hours talking, this and that, interviewing, transitioning, blah, blah, blah. That is more of my thing. So I would put the guy speaking in your ear, the IFB stuff, like, having that in your ear and having someone talk to you. I would put that that skill of being able to speak and roll with someone speaking in your ear along with the prompter skill as well. But as far as this show is concerned, there's not a lot of talking in the air. It's just the way we do it. We also have Slack up here, which you wouldn't have if you're doing a traditional broadcast. So if someone wants to say something to me, they can just write it on Slack, and I can see that in front of me. Slava, hey Ariel, I recently read an article about the UFC having a clause in their contract stating that they have sort of a stake/claim to a business started by a contracted fighter. Is there any truth to this? And if so, do you know the specifics? Love to listen to you, DC, New York Rick, Meh, and Frank each week. Wow. You had to keep that one in, huh? I don't know if
you gotta show that I'm humble.
The UFC having a clause in their contract stating that they have sort of stake/claim to a business started by. I have not heard that, and I don't even know how they would have a leg to stand on there. I mean, there's a lot of things that are questionable about those. Are they employers? Are they contractors? This, that, and the other. But let's say I'm fighter X. Let's say I'm Sean Strickland, and tomorrow I want to start a mini golf business. I don't think the UFC can have a stake in that. And honestly, I don't even know if they have. I don't know if this question is being asked the right way, but I don't even know if they would try to have a stake in that. So times are interesting now with the contracts and this lawsuit that is pending, that is ongoing, the class action suit. So let's see. Mean Tangerine, what a name. Hey, Ariel, greetings from Vancouver, Canada. Been a fan for ages. Love what you do. Thank you very much. Love Vancouver. Out of all the new champions to be crowned thus far, Wild, Hell, Volk, and Islam are the only ones to remain on top. Really? Wow, that is crazy. Is that crazy? What is that true? Let me see here. Pantoja, new champ. O'Malley, new champ. Volk, same. Makhachev, same. Leon, not a new champ, so he is the same too. I guess you're lumping him into the last 13 months, but okay, fine. I'm talking 2023. Sean Strickland. Wow, that is weird looking at the website. That is wild. They still have Jamal Hill up there, but it sounds like they're going to go with a vacant fight. John Jones, Grasso, Zhang. When did Zhang win the belt? Wasn't it last year? It was last year, right?
Yeah, it's 2022.
Yeah, so. And then bantamweight is vacant. But anyway, which champion do you think has the ability to string together the most title defenses going forward? My money is on Sugar Sean. Of the new champions, who has the ability to last the longest? Wow. So that would be between Pantoja, O'Malley, Strickland, Grasso, Jones. Yeah. What do you guys think?
Jones.
Yeah. I mean, I lean towards Jones. Pantoja?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Flyweight's tough.
Who do you lean towards?
I don't know. This sport's too hard to predict.
Yeah. I mean, let's just say that. Okay, Pantoja's next fight against Royval, he could win that fight.
For sure. He'll probably be the favorite in it.
By the way, I'm told now that Eubank is coming on. So stay tuned. He might be popping on.
All right.
Let's see. So he could win that fight. By the way, all the people in the chat that were giving us shit, I hope you. I got 2 words for you. If he does come on, please apologize. O'Malley is probably going to fight Cheeto. I mean, he'll win that fight, so he can have it for a bit. Strickland, if he fights DDP, what do you guys think after that conversation with DDP and after speaking to Nicksick? What do you guys think? Do you think DDP is getting a title shot? And after Dana's comments, I don't think so either. and then
quite simply no.
And then yesterday he kind of tried to walk it back a little bit, but I will say, so I do the post show on Saturday night after the events, and I'm sometimes monitoring Twitter and people are recapping, and it's no fault of their own, but sometimes when you read something on Twitter and then you actually watch the clip, it's 2 very different things, right? And when I saw, okay, rematch, we like it, I was like, all right. And then I saw the clip, I was like, he's just kind of saying I don't hate the idea, but he was very non-committal. And so I don't know if I don't know what he's referring to when he gets all upset about people running with it. but I get the feeling that he is somewhat non-committal about the rematch, but I also get the feeling that I don't think he's jumping at the opportunity to give DDP the next title shot. I feel like the winner of Khamzat and Paulo will be in prime position. What do you guys think?
I honestly think this is all a waste of time because we're in the same situation we'll always be in, which is who's available when they want to make the fight. And without us knowing when they want to make the fight, this is all a waste of time.
Fair.
Because if Khamzat wins and he's available, great. If he doesn't, they'll go to DDP gladly and they'll do that fight. Like we're just spinning our wheels until we know the next time that Sean Strickland's going to fight. Because otherwise, we're in the same situation that happened with Israel Adesanya, where it was like, yeah, it's going to be DDP. And then it wasn't. And then it was Sean Strickland. And they didn't want to do that. And they were dragged into it kicking and screaming. And then they did it. And now he's the champion. So this is all irrelevant, if I'm being completely honest. It's next man up. Whenever that fight is booked for their calendar, whoever is available, that's who it'll be.
Who should get the title shot?
Oh, God, I hate this.
What?
Man, Rick
There is
not
no
about this
meritocracy.
conversation.
Yeah,
Waste
geez.
of time.
It's
Can't
not.
have any
It's just
fun here,
it's
man.
the conversation.
Who
We're
should?
talking.
Hypotheticals, man.
should?
Stop being
Like-
so no nonsense.
Ugh.
I mean, I
ugh.
think
Who
DDP should
who
get it, bro.
deserves it? Ugh.
He beat the hell out of Robert.
Listen, easy for you to say sitting over there. I'm trying to move this show along and buy us some time. All right, Jesus Christ.
It appears as if
I know. I just saw that, but I'm trying to have some banter here. Okay, it's been 3 straight hours. Golly.
DDP has the best win at middleweight, in my opinion. He deserves it from that perspective. He has the best win at middleweight. Even if Khamzat beats Paulo Costa or Paulo Costa beats Khamzat,
100%.
that is not a better win than Robert Whittaker.
finishing Robert Whittaker.
Yeah, the way he did
Yeah.
that, you can't do it better than
He
that.
also did finished Eric Brunson, finished Darren Till as well before that.
Yep.
Like deservedly, he deserves the title shot.
If we're looking at resumes only, his is A++.
He says he's gonna. You talk
Same-
about who's gonna be ready, Rick. He said in that interview today he'll be ready by December. So
Yeah, but he kind of also alluded to the idea that like he'd want to turn around and fight Izzy, and he wasn't, and that's okay. And I'm not going to fault him for that. But like saying that now on September 13th doesn't mean anything if the fight's at some unknown date. We'll see.
I doubt
We'll see.
Strickland's fighting in December.
No way. There's a bunch of
Exactly.
guys
So-
who need to be in there before him who are waiting on title fights. Let me just squeeze in this last question here. John and HB. Ariel, Ian Garry's been vocal about wanting Wonderboy and has seen flashes that Thompson is down. But do you think Uncle Dana will stay true to punishing people for not wanting to fight and not let Wonderboy get that fight? Or is this an exception because of how they're trying to build Ian Garry? Gracias, John and HB. Look, I do think that they can be spiteful. I do think that there are also other people in charge as well. Hunter Campbell, McMaynard, Sean Shelby. So I actually will go back to what New York Rick said. And what New York Rick said, I think, was very apropos. It often comes back to, when they need this slot filled. When do they need this guy to fight? And so if they want Ian Garry in December, and if Wonderboy is the guy, then Wonderboy will be the guy. If they want him in December and he's not available, then he won't be the guy. So I understand what he is saying when he says that. Like, but there's also a game to be played. Like, who should be next? Who should not be next? Is all a very fun game to play as well. But I think the Ian Garry Wonderboy fight makes a lot of sense. And quite frankly, I agree with Ian. I don't want to see Wonderboy get wrestled. Now, I think the Usman fight is a little bit different because they're two, older fighters, and Usman has something to prove, and he needs to get back on track as well. And maybe he wants to fight a former champion and not be the potential stepping stone for an up and comer, for a rising star. I do think Wonderboy should have a say in this matter too. And to Chris Eubank's point, this is one of many differences between boxing and MMA. In MMA, you don't necessarily always have a say. In boxing, you do. Chris Eubank has a say as to who he'll fight next. Wonderboy, maybe not so much. And then, God forbid, you say no, and you're injured or unavailable, all this stuff. And God forbid you make weight, and you don't want to fight in 2 weeks. God forbid you don't want to make weight again 2 weeks later because your opponent missed weight. God forbid you stand up and say, you know what? Maybe I'm not going to do that. Maybe I'm not going to do that. So interesting times. Thanks for watching. We appreciate it very much. Hey, if you like this video, give us the old thumbs up. Subscribe as well. You could get many more of these videos on the channel. So please do that. We would love you forever if you did so.